Once we send the email successfully, we want to add the inquiry header and detail to our database. So we will create an inquiry header object is equal to new inquiry header, and in that we have to populate few details. First is the application user ID. In order to get the user ID, we can do that right here, the first thing inside the post. We will examine the claims identity. So we'll create a variable of claims identity is equal to, right here we'll have the claims identity, and on that we have user.identity. Then we'll have the variable claims here, or claim is equal to the claims identity. We have find first, and we want to find the claim types dot name identifier. Then in claim.value, we will have the user ID. So right here, we will say application user ID is equal to claim.value. Next property, let's populate the full name. That is inside the product user view model. You can see right here, we are using product user view model, and in there we have the application user. So application user dot, we'll use the full name. We'll do the same for email as well as phone number. So let me paste it 2 more times and modify that for email and phone number. Perfect, this looks good. The next property that we have is inquiry date. Inquiry date, let's set this to date10.now, and with this our header looks good. Once we add our header, we need to get the ID of the header and we need to populate that in the detail. We first need to add this record. So for that we'll say inquiry header repo.add, and we will add the inquiry header object, and then do not forget we need to save the changes. Once you save the changes, the header will be created, and now inquiry header.id will have the ID of the new inquiry that was added. If you have 10 items in the shopping cart for inquiry, we need to create 10 records inside the inquiry details. So we need a for each loop here, and if you scroll up where we are adding the product list, we have a for each loop. We can add the same for each loop here. So for each of those product, we need to have an inquiry detail. So let's call this inquiry detail is equal to new inquiry detail, and then we'll set the inquiry header ID. This will be inside the inquiry header.id since we just saved that record. Next we want to save is the product ID, and this is inside prod.id for our for each loop. This looks good. Once you have this object, we need to add that to push to database. So in inquiry details, we will be adding the inquiry detail. Then we need to save it to the database. So inquiry detail repo.save, and with that everything should work. Let's give this a try. Let's run our application and try to submit a new inquiry. I will also open up SQL Server Management Studio. Inside tables, we have the inquiry header, and let me open up inquiry detail. It's empty right now. Let's go back and add items to our shopping cart and submit an inquiry. Let me add 3 items. We'll go to our cart. We have an error for application user repository. This is the error because we forgot to register our application user repo in startup.cs. So let me do that. And let's run our application one more time. We'll have to add the items to our cart again. We'll go to our shopping cart. We have 3 products. Let's hit continue. And I'll just change the name here and submit the inquiry. It will send an email, but along with that, let's examine the table. In detail, we see 3 record because we had 3 items in the shopping cart, and in header, we have the user ID, and you can see the full name is different because we added test at the end. So as you can see, our records are being saved successfully. That being said, our system is not efficient. The reason is if you scroll down right here, what you see when we are adding a detail, if you have 10 items, you are making 10 separate calls. If you move the save outside of the for each block, all of those 10 items will be tracked to be added to database, but it won't make those 10 calls. It will only add them in this one single call. It will push all of the details that you have for an inquiry. So this way it is way more efficient, and you should be aware of where you are saving the database. If you save it inside the for each loop, it will be very inefficient if you have multiple saved records. So make sure when you build your application, you remember the small things because they can help improve the efficiency of the system. That being said, now we have added our inquiry to the database. But we need to implement the admin portion so they can manage these inquiries. Let's work on them in the next video.